The devil himself kicked down Salem's front door, splintering wood and howling wind like a beast unleashed from hell's deepest pit. And he brought an army of shadows with him, twisted, whispering things that slithered into every crack and crevice of the soul. Margaret Hathorne slammed her palm against the frost-laced window of her cramped cottage, her breath fogging the glass as she strained to pierce the veil of night. February 1692. A winter so vicious it clawed at your throat, freezing your screams before they could escape. The kind that drove the sane to barricade their homes, huddled by dying fires, and beg God for mercy that never came. Mama, her young daughter rasped from the dim corner, eyes wide as moons. The shadows, they're breathing. Why are they breathing? Margaret's heart hammered like a war drum, her veins flooding with icy dread. Children always pierce the veil first, the thin membrane between our fragile world and the abyss. They see the truths we adults bury deep, pretending ignorance to survive. Just 3 doors away, in the Paris home, little Betty convulsed on the cold kitchen floor, her body twisting into impossible knots, spine arching like a bowstring pulled to breaking. Her cousin Abigail raked nails down her own flesh, carving crimson runes that pulsed with unnatural light, symbols from tongues long forgotten, older than Babel's fall, etched in blood and agony. The town doctor burst in, only to recoil, his face paling to ash. "No fever, no poison," he stammered, stumbling backward as if the girl's screams were venom in the air. This is the devil's grip. The evil hand clutches them tight. Those cursed words. Those 6 damning syllables that ignited Salem's pyre, drowning the village in rivers of blood and broken screams. Back then, life teetered on a knife's edge, between 2 realms, the sunlit facade of plowed fields, mended roofs, and pious prayers, and the midnight void where primordial horrors lurked, just beyond the flicker of your candle. Most folks clamped their eyes shut to that darkness, whispering denials like talismans. But in Salem that winter, the barrier shattered. Cracks spiderwebbed through reality, letting the old ones seep in. Margaret's neighbor, Bridget Bishop, the woman with eyes like storm clouds and a voice that could coax secrets from stone, had always been a storm unto herself. She found lost trinkets with a mere brush of her fingers, murmured incantations to barren orchards that burst into defiant bloom amid blizzards. She gazed into your soul and pulled out your hidden sins, one by one, like threads from a fraying tapestry. "She's tainted," the villagers hissed in shadowed alleys. Marked by the infernal since birth. What they buried in silence were the miracles. Her cattle never sickened, thriving fat and strong while others withered. Her well gushed sweet water through the driest hells. And when she sang those eerie melodies, tunes that twisted like smoke, crying infants fell silent, their tiny faces easing into unnatural peace. Fear twists minds into knots. It blinds. It kills. Always has. Always will. The accusations erupted like hellfire in parched tinder. Betty and Abigail, eyes rolling back to whites, jabbed accusatory fingers at Bridget. At Sarah Good, the ragged beggar whose venomous curses didn't just sting, they warped fate, curdling milk in udders and blighting crops with a single glare. At Tituba, the enslaved woman from distant Barbados, whose knowledge of herbs and spirits made the Puritan elders tremble, their dreams haunted by visions of her dancing under blood moons. But listen close, because the dusty tomes of history hide the raw truth. They weren't wrong. Not about pacts with horned demons or midnight Sabbaths sealed in gore. No. But the power? That surged like lightning in their veins, undeniable and ancient. Bridget communed with entities that ignored mortal pleas, spirits of root and branch that bent to her will. Sarah's words weren't mere spite, they carried the weight of curses forged in forgotten forges, bending the world to her wrath. And Tituba? She invoked deities older than the cross, gods with fangs that dripped venom and eyes that pierced eternity, beings who demanded tribute in whispers and blood. Spring brought the trials, a carnival of terror under Judge Samuel Sewell's iron gaze, his robes swallowing light like a void. The accused were hauled into suffocating courtrooms, chains rattling like death's own laughter. Neighbors spat testimonies, soured butter, calves born twisted, infants shrouded in calls that foretold doom. Confess your covenant with Satan, the judges thundered, hammers pounding like heartbeats in the grave. But they missed the mark entirely. The true interrogations should have clawed deeper. What slithered toward you in the moonless woods? What ancient vows did you seal to shield this forsaken town from starvation's maw? What blood oaths did your foremothers swear, binding your line to forces that hunger eternally? Margaret pressed against her window, heart seizing as they marched Bridget to the gallows. The noose dangled like a serpent's coil. Bridget's gaze locked onto hers through the jeering mob, a piercing stare that burned like embers. A faint nod. A murmur on the wind, tasting of rust and withered petals. It awakens. The rope jerked. Bridget's neck cracked like thunder. The crowd roared in savage triumph. And in the forest's depths, something colossal stirred, grinning with teeth of shadow, its hunger sharpening to a razor's edge. Killing a witch doesn't end the magic. It doesn't snuff the flame. It fans it into an inferno, vengeful and eternal. That very night, Margaret's daughter bolted upright in bed, eyes glassy as polished obsidian, spewing words in a guttural tongue that slithered through the air like smoke. Not English. Not human. Yet Margaret understood, every syllable a blade twisting in her gut, promising retribution in screams and fire. The hangings dragged on through sweltering summer, a relentless parade of death. 19 dangled from ropes, bodies twitching in grotesque dances. One man, Giles Corey, crushed beneath boulders that ground his bones to paste, his final words a defiant curse, more weight. Each execution poured fuel on the awakening beast below Salem, a primordial entity that had slumbered since the land's first peoples walked it, honoring it with rites now forgotten. By fall, doubt gnawed at the judge's iron resolve. Their own kin twisted in nightmarish fits. Wives jolted awake, shrieking of spectral women with rope-scarred throats hovering at bed's end, fingers outstretched in accusation. The trials collapsed in a frenzy of regret. Pardons flew like scattered leaves. Coins clinked into widows' palms as hollow apologies. The town plastered over the horror with claims of mass delusion, a fever dream of fear. But Margaret knew the lie. She'd glimpsed the entities stalking midnight lanes, forms with elongated limbs and eyes like glowing coals. The air thickened, heavy with spectral rage, debts unpaid and festering. Those hanged were guilty, yes. Guilty of guarding forbidden lore in a world hell-bent on erasure. Guilty of nurturing pacts that predated the Mayflower's sails. Guilty of feeding hungers that outlast empires, hungers that coil, patient and insatiable. Salem learned to live in terror's shadow after that. Mothers hammered iron wards into thresholds, whispering wards against the encroaching dark. Farmers scattered offerings at field edges, bread soaked in blood, herbs twisted into knots. On moonless nights, when winds carried echoes of old laments, doors bolted shut, ears plugged against names hissed on the gale. Margaret endured to 93, her body a withered husk, but her eyes still sharp as daggers. On her deathbed, her great-granddaughter bent low, breath hot against her ear. "What haunts us, grandmother?" They're rising, Margaret croaked, voice a rattle of bones. The old ones. The debts compound. Blood calls to blood. The girl paled. What debts? Margaret's lids fluttered shut. Her final exhale hung in the air, coiling into frost script, names, curses, vows unbreakable. The true horror of Salem's witches isn't guilt or innocence. It's the rupture of covenants forged in antiquity, before your ancestors stole this soil. It's the resurrection of what you bury alive, clawing free, ravenous. Today, Salem pulses with life atop those cursed graves. Tourists shuffle past execution sites, snapping photos. Shops hawk cheap trinkets, glowing wands, rubber bats. They've commodified the nightmare, laughing it away. But on those February midnights, when frost etches sigils on your pain and shadows pulse with breath, the elders still shudder. They heed Margaret's echo. They feel the broken oaths tightening like nooses. And they know, some debts transcend death. They accrue interest in souls. The witches weren't illusions. Their descendants walk among us, veins thrumming with inherited power. That insistent pounding at your door on storm-lashed nights? The chill that seeps through cracks, whispering your name. That's them. Collecting. And this time, they won't stop until the ledger balances, in blood, in screams, in unrelenting fury. What will you offer when they come for you?